putting an end to identity politics. This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Accusations leveled against Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein came to light. Congresswoman Bernice Johnson, who represents the 30th Congressional District in Dallas, says she was disappointed in the man who was a big financial supporter of fellow Democrats in Washington. But she also believes women have a responsibility as well.
I grew up at a time when it was as much the woman's responsibility as the man's. How you addressed, what your behavior was. So I'm from the old school, that you can have behaviors that appear to be inviting. It can be interpreted as such. That's the responsibility, I think, of the female.
Congresswoman Johnson, who has been alive more than 8 decades, acknowledges she is from the old school, but insists her message is meant to empower women.
Do you think it's time to stop talking about what women are wearing in this conversation and talk instead about the power that some people have and the power that some people abuse?
I think we also need to start talking about the power that women have to control the situation. There's law enforcement. You can refuse to cooperate with that kind of behavior. I think that many times men get away with this because they're allowed to get away with it by the women. When you have an expectation that that might happen and that's how you got to do it to make it, that's a mental thing that has to change with the woman.
Welcome back, everybody. Kevin Jackson. That was Bernice Johnson. She's a Democrat in District 30 out of Texas. And I got to tell you, when I watch Bernice Johnson, and I'm sure many blacks feel a lot the same way, she reminds me of my grandmother in many ways. Dyed-in-the-wool Democrat. I looked at her skin. She's got beautiful skin. If you see her video, she's 80 years old. She so reminds me of my grandmother. My grandmother was a much prettier lady. That's not a slam at her. My grandmother was just gorgeous. She really was. And but I look at Bernice Johnson and I see my grandmother in her. And when she's saying this, but my first thought was, Holy Mother of Todd Aiken. What did Bernice Johnson just say? What is going to be the backlash from the left on this 80-year-old, this octogenarian black Democrat congresswoman who dares speak the truth about women and womanhood and being a lady and so on and so forth? She sounded a lot like a conservative, right? There I was pulling a Chris Hayes on you, right? She drove a stake through the heart of the women's movement. Now, I'm going to say this. I disagree with her on part of it. I don't believe a man ever has a right to force himself onto a woman, whether it's with his physical power or whether it's the power of a position. You know, like, well, you know, in order for you to do this, you've got to sleep with me or whatever. I don't believe either of those cases should exist. But what Bernice Johnson is saying, and we'll get more into this, is that women can keep themselves out of that situation. I agree with what Bernice Johnson said. In many cases around Harvey Weinstein, the women had the ability to stop the man. Let's face it. Sometimes life takes courage. And unfortunately for the left, they define courage in the strangest of ways. And I'll give you an example. I've used this example before, so bear with me, but it makes my point. Jason Collins was called courageous when he came out gay. And this was a man who was engaged to a woman to marry her. He's making her believe that she's, you know, going to have a husband who's going to take care of her and love, honor, cherish, it's blah, blah, blah. But the president of the United States at the time, Barack Hussein Obama, called Jason Collins to congratulate a man for cowardice. The cowardice of Jason Collins is that he hid his sexuality from his fiancée, not from a girl he was dating, not from a girl he had met, not from a girl he was seeing, not from a friend or whatever. This is somebody with whom I'm presuming he had some sort of intimacy, and he certainly led her to believe that they were going to be married. And Obama defined that as courage. I just want you to understand the backdrop of courage, how we define it versus how they define it. Let me tell you something. Many of the things that are defined as courageous to me, I go, that's not courageous. That's just normal, conservative people doing things. For example, he ran to the car to help that child or get that whatever. That's just normal stuff that we do. Conservative men rush into the river to save the family. We, grab the kid out of traffic. We stop the attacking dogs. We do that stuff is normal for us. We don't even look at it. Interview a conservative man after something like that. He's run into a house because he heard a kid crying. He doesn't. They put the camera in his face. You're a hero. I'm not a hero. I did what everybody together, anybody would have done. Now, anybody doesn't mean a leftist. A leftist will watch you burn. It's just the truth. They don't have the testosterone. I may be a little preachy and I may be a little one-sided towards conservative men, but I will put conservative men against these lefty metrosexuals any day of the week. We have real men, rugged men. We are what arms. If you want to know who's protecting this country, it is conservative men. That's why the left hates the military. We're too manly. The military showcases the American man. And they hate that because guess what? They want no pronouns and no genders and blah, blah, blah. 3 genders, 20 genders. Why not 50? They don't like men. They don't want us to be men. And did we ever play that Limbaugh clip where he talked about that? I don't know if we did, but it's worth hearing where Limbaugh says they want to emasculate us. I've talked about it time and time again. Young boys are being not called on. I talked about it the other day. I'm not going to rehash it. But what I'm getting at is the manly man. That's who we are. And women have, this is the strange thing. Women have much more power over us than they give themselves credit for. I believe they know it. They have much more power. Certainly conservative women know how much power they wield over their men. You want to know why? Because we respect them. At some point, a man has done something in his life. He's like, going up. And his wife says, babe, honey. And he's like, what? And she's like, you're going overboard or whatever. And she, through a voice of reason, gets him to just go, you know what? You're right. He doesn't have to listen. I mean, it's like a female gorilla saying to the silverback, hey, calm down. He looks over. This is a dude that can lift an SUV. And he calms down. It isn't music that calms the savage beast. It's woman. Anyway, life's choices require courage. And for the left to look for role models and courage is an exercise in futility. Courage is in short supply anywhere leftism flourishes. You can't find courage there. Oh, those girls are courageous for coming forward with Weinstein. Really? How courageous are they? They've waited decades. Their careers are built. And get this, even with their careers built, with women who have made millions of dollars and can still command millions of dollars, who else has been outed in Hollywood? I'm going to keep bringing it up until they do it. I wrote of Feminism. They may publicly play the fraud, but behind closed doors, they are anything but feminist. Occasionally, and it is admitted rarely, one of these feminists admits publicly that they screwed up. And that's what happened to this devout feminist as she apologized to Christians. And it was a thing in WND, a founding member of the radical feminist group called Femin, disavowed the organization. She apologized to Christians and she adopted a pro-life stance. Sarah Fernanda Giromini, once known as Sarah Winter, helped create Femin Brazil in 2012, and now she says the group promotes the destruction of the traditional family and all moral values of society. Now, you know my stance on feminism. It's not needed. Provides a crutch for women too lazy to work in relationships. They blame being physically and emotionally vile human beings on men. They've decimated the black community, and I've talked about it for a long time. And I'll cover it a little bit more in a bit. But Eddie Bernice Johnson, she gets it. And she's laying out truth. She's saying, you know what, women? You don't have to put yourself in a situation. You can, if all the women in Hollywood said, I'm not getting on the casting couch, what happens? You got to start putting people in roles because they're good. It's easy to fix. And do you go back to a director's room by yourself? The answer is, of course not.
He won't stop until he's the top-rated radio talk show host in America.
What kind of weird competitive freak are you?
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.